Today is the day. We have been announcing this, advertising this, promoting it. We've gotten so many calls, so many letters, so many emails, so many carrier pigeons, every way you can figure it out. We've been hearing from the folks. We are just excited and honored to have as our very special guest here in the studio of Sun Life Broadcasting Network, Candace Owens. Hello, Candace.
Thank you all for sending the carrier pigeons. It worked.
Candace is on a book tour. This is her brand new book entitled Blackout. Bestseller already. Barnes & Noble's, and 100,000 copies first week. Fantastic. If you don't have it, you need to get this book. I want to read just a little bit about what it says on the back from the introduction because it's very poignant. While Democrats have long acknowledged our struggles and the crimes enacted against us, they have done very little to provide actual remedies or prepare us for a future that doesn't center on our brokenness. As we approach the 2020 election, I'm asking the Black community to consider the realities of our current economic state, the condition of our schools and neighborhoods, the number of our young men who are incarcerated. For too long, we have been lied to by the Democrats who have relied upon our votes to maintain them in power. For too long, we have believed that the state is sovereign. We do not belong to the Democratic Party. We do not belong to socialism. We answer to the true God, not the God of government. Candace, what a profound statement. And let's just hit right in a minute. What do you want to say to the Black community in America 2 months before the election?
You know, there's a lot that I wanted to say, which is why I wrote a book. But I think what it really comes down to is just asking a simple question, which is, are you happy? Is this working for you? We've been locked in this system of voting the same way for the last 6 decades, and we have virtually nothing to show for it. And I know that the reasons for that is because we've seen the left push further and further towards these socialist ideals, these Marxist principles, away from faith, towards atheism, and all of that allows for them to grow government. And what I think the left is truly after is government replacing God. And I wanted to present that argument along with many others in my book to sort of trace the history of the left and the Marxist principles, so maybe have people know who Karl Marx even was and what he believed in.
Right.
Because we see this word socialism being tossed around so casually in this country and other countries, and very few people even know what socialism is, what the roots are, what Karl Marx believed in, and how what he would have thought of the Black community or any other minority community if he was still alive today.
You know, the thing people realize about Karl Marx is, you know, first of all, he was a bum, never held a job, lived off of the largesse of women and others, hardly ever took a bath until people made him. And in other words, he was just a total, absolute outcast and a bum. But what strikes me, Candace, and maybe you can answer this, is I've watched scores of your videos, Charlie Kirk's, others, you know, and they go onto these campuses and they ask students about socialism. First of all, they can't even define what it is, but yet they have a favorable view. And really, when it gets down to it, it's socialism is government ruling the people. We become the puppet of the state. That's what we are. And of course, being 100% capitalist, and like we tell everybody here, the Bible, the Word of God, promotes capitalism, private property ownership, investment, developing what you have, even to the point that in the Mosaic Law, the Lord instituted what was called the Year of Jubilee. And the foundation of property and home was so ingrained in Christian culture and the Jewish culture that every 50 years, whatever had been lost, if you'd lost property in a land deal, if you had gone bankrupt, everything reverted back to its original owner because the Bible promotes their own ownership. Why is it you think the African-American community doesn't understand that they can make whatever they want to make out of this country. They can better themselves. They can make something out of themselves. What's the deal? What's holding them back?
So I think there are two things. The first is that Black Americans have been conditioned to believe in the collective and not to believe in the individual. And a huge component of that is white guilt. So white people are playing a part in this, and they don't realize it. This is sort of systematic. It started in the mid-1960s, and I trace that in my book, talking about Lyndon Baines Johnson and government involvement. At every step that the government has involved itself in the affairs of Black Americans, things have gotten worse. And the greatest example of that would be the welfare system. The Great Society Act that was put into place right after Black Americans, ironically, received all of our freedoms. The government took it right back via welfare, the welfare institution. And encouraged via welfare for single Black women not to marry the father of their children. So father absence and the breakdown of the family is, in my opinion, the greatest ill facing our society. I view Black Americans as the original experiment with that, to see how much power the government could garner over the people in this country. But now they're extending it, right? They want every race to sort of look at this, and you're seeing that through radicalized feminism. We're devaluing men in this country. Women can do it by themselves. You see this through the aggressive push of the LGBT agenda. Kids can choose their genders. Well, what does radical feminism, the transgender movement, and welfare benefits and believing in socialism all have in common? And it's an attack on the nuclear family.
Exactly.
And in order for a government to grow, it needs to destabilize the family. And Karl Marx believed in this. He was against the nuclear family. He was against family. Because, again, if you believe that your ideals and your values come from your family, you're going to be less inclined to go to the government for every answer.
Right.
When you have a stable family, there's usually a strong backbone of faith. And if you believe that you answer to the true God, then you're not going to be inclined to worship government. So they have to destroy all of that in order to tread society towards a more narcissistic, selfish, atheistic viewpoint that it has to be in that condition for the government to be omnipotent.
Josh, Gabe, jump in anytime. I'm the old guy here today, 65, and we got the 30 age group, we got the 40, and the millennials. I'm the old fogey generation.
Baby boomer.
But I remember the civil rights movement. I lived through it. I watched it on television. I can remember the video images of Bull Connor. I saw that on television. I can still remember watching Martin Luther King's funeral and how profound and how moving it was. I can remember listening to the I Have a Dream speech in Memphis. I can remember the Washington speech. Even to today, being a public speaker, I will go and listen to his speeches and watch them 2 or 3 times a year because America's greatest public speaker. But to see where we evolved from the dream that Dr. King had, where he was pushing for his community to rise up, to be treated fairly and equally, which they should. And as a Southerner, we were wrong, totally dead wrong. And God, we had to before America could become a great nation, we had to address the stain on our nation. And we did it with 600,000 plus lives shed on American soil. And then following it all up to the Great Society, I have read probably 50 books on LBJ, character of all characters. But how that his idea of bringing the Voting Rights Act and all of that was not really for the betterment of the people, but as a tool to control for the Democratic Party.
Right.
And I'm not going to go into details with, what I'm talking about, things that he said and he did. But how do we turn it around?
Right. I think, the only way to turn things around is through education, which is why I wanted to put my ideals in this book and the principles that I believe in this book, and to give people something to hold, because right now our education system is not educating children, it's miseducating them. And you're seeing, rather than children learning hard academics, rather than children learning facts, they're learning feelings. And it's being treated as if psychological conditioning is being prioritized in the school system. So now kids are learning about white privilege, kids are learning about race, kids don't even see race.
Right.
And they're being taught it at such a young age because what they're trying to do is raise up these anti-American Marxists in the school system. So it's unlikely, and I'd say almost impossible, that there's going to be a Black conservative perspective or a conservative perspective, period, that's going to be taught via the public school system. It's unlikely that you're going to see pro-American books. You see this with the push for the 1619 Project,
horrible.
which is basically saying that any positive viewpoints of America needs to be wiped from the school system. You see this with the people erasing the Pledge of Allegiance, which, you know, when I was growing up was every morning you just did the Pledge of Allegiance, and now all of that stuff is saying it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, it's backwards, because what the left is after, and they do have a stranglehold on the education system, is deconstructing Western civilization. So what we have to do is we need to win the ideas. We need to educate people. And I've certainly tried that, because what are kids doing outside of school? Well, they're on their phones, they're on social media, they're finding people like me. I started on YouTube. And so it's so important that we put out the truth, and at the same time that we have people in places, and this is why politics is so important, to fight this the systemic lies that are starting to be fostered in the school system.
Can I interject something here? You bring up the word systemic, and incidentally, I had a chance to read through your book. It's excellent, and the points that you address and the way that you address them, I was thrilled to see. It's what our generation, I think you're a millennial as well, it's what our generation needs to see, because we have been raised to not be taught the truth. But going back to what I was going to bring up, you bring up this term systemic, and there is a mantra that's in the world today, in our nation especially, regarding institutional, or this idea of systemic racism, that this notion of the way the system is constructed automatically puts especially blacks at a disadvantage, that no matter how hard you try, you are never going to be able to come out from around or in that circumstance in which you were born, for a variety of reasons. Now, I was pleased to see, I think you agree, that that has become simply an excuse for lawlessness, an excuse for continued entitlements. But that all derives itself from this critical race theory that exists, which goes back to Marxism. It comes from Frankfurt Institute and from Marxism. It is a Marxist ideology. Now, most young people don't know that, but this notion of institutional racism, that embedded within the very bedrock of our society, are things that will prevent those in the black community from being able to aspire, from being able to have success. Now, people all the time prove that's not true, but yet there's a lie that's been bought. Can you speak to that theory that's in the minds of a lot of young people today?
Yeah, it makes them very uncomfortable, because the truth makes people uncomfortable. But the idea of systemic racism, and when I hear this all the time, I hear it from white people too, because they're being conditioned to believe that it exists. I always say to those people, what is it that you can do in this society as a white man that I can't do as a black woman? Just name the rule, name the policy, name the room that I'm not allowed to step into, and they can't answer it because it's fluff. The irony, though, is that if you asked me to do the same, what can I do as a black person that you can't do as a white person or as a white male? I could name various things. We have affirmative action in support of black people in schools, which means that I can get worse grades than you and apply to a school, and I'm more likely to get in just on the basis of my skin color. So we've said, actually, there's a lot of instances and examples of black privileges that are being afforded because of this idea of systemic oppression that doesn't exist. And where it really comes from is that you had an entire generation of people who actually received equality, in 1964 with the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. But that actually comes with a lot of responsibility, and that's scary. When you actually have equality, it means that you are now responsible for yourself. And that's a scary thing for a group of people that have actually lived through real oppression, to suddenly realize, wait, we have no more excuse. Now we have to do the hard work. And this is what ushered in that period of white guilt that I'm talking about, where people kept allowing that excuse to go, well, it's because of these past oppressions, it's because of these past oppressions. It no longer exists. Now, if you are behind, it's because of your own bad choices, and maybe the bad choices of your parents, and they didn't, give you a good starting place in life. I mean, for one, I have parents that are separated. My mother didn't finish high school, so my mother had 4 children out of wedlock. So there are all of these decisions my mother made that definitely didn't give me an advantage in life. But I am where I am because I worked hard, and I didn't accept any excuses because my grandfather didn't raise me to believe or to see myself as less than. And so it was just hard work, which is the same path that everybody has to take. Now, is there privilege that exists? You'll hear this if somebody is born with tons of money. Yes, that's called economic privilege, though. It's not race. So Sasha and Malia Obama are not suffering because of the color of their skin. They are afforded privileges because their father was Barack Obama. He's a former president. They're going to Harvard. So they have privilege. They have economic privilege. And any person can aspire to that and gain that in life.
Excellent.
Yeah, you know, Candace, you have a lot of friends here and a lot of people that love you. And I have watched you many times in interviews on television and so forth, just as Donnie mentioned just a few moments ago. And I have wondered, how did that young lady, you're so conservative, you are so right on what you are talking about, and it impresses me. And you're someone I would want as my friend. And so, but the thing of it is, Candace Owens, how did you get to this place?
I always say I took a very liberal route to conservatism. But the important thing, which the Bible talks about, is raising up a child in the way that they should be raised up. And then in the future, that child will come back. And that was me. My grandfather raised me to be extremely conservative. I did not point that conservatism to a political ideology. So at the same time that I was learning leftist ideology in school, everything that my grandfather did in his life was conservative. So I grew up with a grandfather who, in his youth, grew up on a sharecropping farm in segregated North Carolina, laying out tobacco to dry when he was just 5 years old. And growing up in his household, he never said anything bad about white people, never said anything about racism. In fact, if you ask him today, he always says the same thing, which is that it was just a different time. And he's worked his entire life. My grandfather now is retired back on that sharecropping farm as the owner of it. When we grew up in his, and that's the American dream. If you work hard, doesn't matter what barriers you're facing, you can get ahead in life. And growing up in his household, there were a lot of rules. And prayer was the most important thing. He believed in faith, number one, family, number two. So we had to read the Bible every single day. He'd make us a big Southern breakfast, and he would teach us scriptures. Now, in my youth, in my mind, I think Granddad just wants to make us grits and eggs and bacon and feed us before school. But he knew exactly what he was doing. And he knew that eventually those seeds that he was planting would harvest. And I realized when I took my liberal route, once I got out of my grandfather's house and I was in college and I was partying and I was miserable and I believed in, you know, all of these external secular things, on the inside I was dying. And the only time that I could recall being content and feeling okay about myself was when I lived under my grandmother and my grandfather's roof. So they were getting something right. And that something right was good values, good morals, married to my grandmother for 53 years until her dying day. That something right was faith, that something right was family. And the world was trying to condition me to believe that all of those things were wrong. But I came back in the end and realized this actually works, and we need to make sure that we're fighting to protect those institutions.
And your grandfather is someone I would have liked to have met, because he seems so, in your book, and she's got a great book, and I want to make sure that all of you today can order this book, and we'll be giving you the information on it in just a moment. But he seems like such a great man, and the way he handled you kids was amazing to me. You know, he didn't fuss at you or jump on you. He would maybe just ignore you for a while like you didn't exist.
Yes.
If you didn't speak properly or act properly.
That's right. So he did this thing, which you're referring to, I talk about in my book. Simple thing in the morning, if we came down and we were super tired for breakfast and forgot to say good morning, he would just sit down, everybody else would get a plate, and whoever didn't say good morning, we wouldn't get a plate. So we'd be groggy, and we'd be looking around the table at everybody else's food and go, why didn't I get it? And then you'd remember that you didn't say good morning. And then you go, oh, Granddad, good morning. And he'd go, hi, baby. I didn't see you there. And then he'd go, let me get you a plate. And that was his way of just instilling respect. You know, you wake up in the morning, you greet people, you say good morning, and you just, you execute a little bit of kindness in the morning no matter how tired you are. So that was his way of just raising us the right way.
That's exactly right. I want to bring something up. You're the founder of the Blex, am I pronouncing it right, Foundation. And it's dedicated to the advancement of minority communities through education and entrepreneurialism and criminal justice reform. I've read about that earlier concerning you coming on the program, and I read that. But how long has that been formed, and exactly what are you guys doing?
So Blexit, it stands for Black Exit, which we sort of ripped from Brexit. And yes, I formed that 501c3 not-for-profit about a year ago is when we got our not-for-profit. But we've been around for about 2 years, going into inner cities and really just telling the truth, educating people, talking about conservative principles, talking about abortion, talking about the history of abortion and how it has disproportionately affected the minority community. And we do these massive events. They're really fun and they're purely educational. I said I wanted to do something different in the conservative movement by putting together events that felt like concerts. So we get giant LED screens and we go in there and you'll have, instead of Kanye West walking out, it's Larry Elder to talk to you about father absence. Yeah. It's Dinesh D'Souza to talk to you about the true history of the Democrat Party. And I'll get up there and we'll just talk about the various ills and personal responsibility. People always say, what can I do as a white person to help Black America? It's the best thing you could do is stop thinking that as a white person, it's your responsibility to help Black America, because it's not. We have to sort out the various ills in our own community, the perpetuation of our culture. And we talk a lot about that at Blexit. There's a lot of things that are broken within our own culture. You can't rap and sing about gangs and violence and then be shocked when your men have a disproportionate incarceration rate compared to other races. So that's what Blexit is all about. It's about teaching young kids, young Black kids in inner cities, personal responsibility.
Have you seen a change in the younger generation because of the Blexit movement? Have you been able to see that?
Yes, it has been amazing. It has been a blessing. When I first came out here, I was called all of the typical racial slurs that Black conservatives get called, and it felt like I was the only one.
Right.
And now we are just expanding, and we're just trying to give everybody a home because so many people are realizing, okay, now I understand what she means. And it's all about just continuing the fight, waking up every day and renewing that fight. And I knew that it was possible. I understood that the left had almost brilliantly used culture to manipulate Black minds, like the LeBron James, the rappers, to come out and say Black Lives Matter and not really tell you what principles Black Lives Matter stands on. So I attacked culture. I attacked the demigods. The Bible talks a lot about idolatry. And this is actually one of the greatest sins in not just the Black community, the American community. This concept of Hollywood, this concept that Taylor Swift can come down and tell you how to vote. And you should listen to her because she's Taylor Swift or because he's LeBron James. Even calling these people kings and queens. It's a sin to call LeBron James a king. It's a sin to call Beyonce a queen. So I took the cultural route in understanding that politics was downstream from culture, and I attacked people and went after their standpoints, people that it was just not okay to attack before. You don't say anything bad about Beyonce or Taylor Swift. And I think people started to realize, wow, this girl's serious, and she's bringing the fight.
I've seen you in your debates against some of these Hollywood actors, actresses, athletes. What do they come away with after they spar with you? I mean, do they have a greater respect for you, or do they have a greater hatred for you?
That's a good question. I think it's probably a combination of both, because I think they realize that those old Hollywood tricks of I'm just this person so I can say it doesn't work. And I think they have to respect the fact that I'm extremely educated. And I think they respect the fact that I even have the nerve and that their usual tricks don't work. So I think that they now probably have a healthy reverence for me. And they know that I'm not a fan. I don't think you're a king. I don't think you're a queen. In many ways, I see you guys as children that are being manipulated by people that are far more nefarious and far more Machiavellian. Than they're even willing to admit.
I say this before we take the break. Of course, I think it's highly noted that you and Cardi B had your little spat. and I will say this, after watching a little bit of it, you really put her in her place, because you really showed the American people that she has no idea what she's talking about, regardless of what her stance is and regarding how that she's got a #1 rap song or whatever the case, which is absolutely hideous beyond reason. But I think it goes to show that the left, all they have is talking points, whereas you actually have an experience and you back it up with education and facts.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Just want to say that.
Yeah, we've got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, I have several emails that have come in, and if you don't mind, I'm going to read those. And the first one here says, God bless you all. I love the program, and I love Candace. With that said, I have to know if Candace was instrumental in flipping Leo Terrell. I used to watch him, and I used to watch him and Candace go at it on Laura Ingram's show. I love the change in him. What has happened to him? He's really changed.
He has, and yes, I'm so happy this person realizes that I deserve a Nobel Peace Prize. I was talking to Laura. I was like, Laura, you and I really deserve a Nobel Peace Prize for this transformation. And you know, I think what really happened with Leo was I would debate him obviously every week, and I was just remarkably calm because everything he was saying was so foolish that he would have to scream. And I realized that he was sort of having a breaking point where nothing he said made sense. I mean, Laura could have asked us anything, and he would just go, Trump, 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 orange man bad. And I'd be like, Leo, I don't even think you're hearing the question. And I think you're only willing to be a fool for so long before you realize that we're being calm, we're being collective. I'm just giving you data points and statistics, and you're just saying orange man bad. So I think he had his own personal epiphany and no longer wanted to play the part of the fool. And yeah, if I don't get a Nobel Peace Prize about it, I will be very upset. So.
Yeah, do you think he realizes he was playing the part of the fool?
I think he does.
Yeah. Well, he is. There's a change in him.
Yeah.
I saw him the other day, and I did a double take because I couldn't believe that this was the same man, and the words that was coming out of his mouth was opposite of what I've heard from him for I don't know how long. Candace is a hero of mine. Maybe her and Shapiro will run for president. Shapiro will run for president on the Republican ticket. God, I pray this for 2024. Frank, New York City, Marxist East. I don't know what that means, but I just read it out. All right. It said, Candace, it has been proven by the FBI that the KKK has infiltrated the police force throughout America, with over 2 million people being incarcerated, holding 25% of the world's prison population, but only 5% of the world's total population, and 40% of Americans' population being black male. What will it take for America to fix the police brutality problem against black people?
We don't have a police brutality problem in America, so I'm going to push back on the narrative that it has been proven that the Ku Klux Klan has infiltrated. So the first thing, and this goes back to my point about personal responsibility, you will hear people tell you that there are more black men in prison, but they won't tell you what crimes they are in prison for. Black men disproportionately commit crimes in this country, and when they're not in prison because they were smoking pot, they're in prison for murder, armed robbery, for violent crimes. In all of these instances where you talk about police brutality, and you can use various examples, recently, any example, and you just ask a very simple question: was this black person peacefully just dealing with the police officers, or were they resisting arrest and did things escalate? And in each circumstance, black people are resisting arrest, being violent, and not listening to police officers. Personal responsibility means first thing first is listen to police officers. It's a pretty simple, authoritative thing that my grandfather, you listen to authority, whether you agree with them or you're really angry at them. Sometimes I don't think I deserve the ticket. I respect authority and I deal with things later. The second thing is black Americans. We represent 13% of the population and account for over 40% of all the murders in this country. Unless this writer is suggesting that black men should not have to go to prison if they murder people, which again would not be equality, that would be an entitlement, then we have to talk about what happens before then. Why are black men committing more crimes? Why are black men disproportionately committing more murders? And that goes back to a culture issue, which I brought up earlier. It goes back to father absence. When you talk about a group of people that don't respond well to authority, you're talking about a group of people that are growing up without fathers in the home, which that stems from all of that. So black Americans in the 1960s had a 23% single motherhood rate. Today we have a 74% single motherhood rate. 74% of black children are growing up without that basic foundational structure of having fraternity in the home, having that grandfather who doesn't give you a plate because you didn't say good morning. And everything falls apart from there. If you don't have to respect anyone in your home, you're not going to respect your teachers. You're certainly not going to respect police officers. So we need to stop blaming police officers and start talking about fixing the ills in our own community.
Yeah. Okay. It's been.
Well,
one
if
more
I could
question.
interject
Yeah,
on, this,
sure.
on this issue, we talk about criminal justice system. And of course, I believe that once somebody enters into that, they're arrested for the first time. Maybe it is just for pot or whatever the case, but they tend to stay in the system.
Yes.
It's just a repeat situation, a lifelong sentence in and out, if you will. How do you feel our criminal justice system is set up? Because I've had a lot of people that have gotten in touch with us for our program saying that we feel that the criminal justice system is skewed against black people, that particularly black males, that the reason, going back to responsibility, the reason that so many black men are incarcerated is not for any other reason than that they're put there on purpose because of judges, because of maximum sentencing issues. How do you address that subject?
So there's two parts to this. The first thing is that there has definitely been sentencing in the past that disadvantaged, but it wasn't because of your skin color, but like, for example, the 3 strikes bill, which was authored by Joe Biden. The irony of this is all of those ills they're talking about came from Democrat policies. Authored by Joe Biden, passed by Bill Clinton, the crime bill of '94 basically said, doesn't matter what those 3 strikes are, they can be 3 petty strikes, but you're going to go to prison for the rest of your life. It's one of the reasons why I'm a big supporter of, Donald Trump, who sought to reverse all of those things that were wrong. But in terms of why people stay in the system after they commit the first crime, this is also why I supported Donald Trump's criminal justice reform policies, because he was talking about reducing recidivism. And the reason why recidivism happens, why people return to prison, I grew up with uncles that were in and out of prison my entire life. I visited my uncle in prison when I was a girl. When you keep a man in prison for 1 year, let's say, I don't know, he broke into somebody's home, and then after a full year of not having any jobs, having any contacts, and being in the system, he goes out into the world. What do you expect him to do when all he gets is a bus ticket and $50? In order to make a living, they commit another crime, right? They steal something, they do something. So you're fostering almost like an ecosystem that almost guarantees they'll end up back in prison. And eventually, if they spend enough time in prison, they kind of want to go back because it feels like home. They don't know how to act in the real world. So the question to ask is, how do we reduce that problem from happening? And I think that this administration has addressed it by decreasing recidivism rates, by making sure that there are transition programs set in place. They're looking for corporations that say, you know what, we will hire people right out of prison. And that has been a huge conservative push. If you look at the corporations that have signed up to do that, they're largely conservative corporations, many of them in the South, the irony being the South has this image of being, the racist South. So there are tons of things that can be done to transform sort of the past harms of Democrat policies. But again, this is in no way saying that Black Americans don't commit more crimes. We do commit more crimes. We commit more violent crimes than any other racial group in this country.
Okay, Candace, it said, I'm so excited that Candace Owens is your great guest today. And Candace, can you please explain what Black Lives Matter really is? Do you think that Black Lives Matter is being successful in categorizing as racist anyone who does not support them?
So Black Lives Matter, so you have two things, is people will say the phrase Black Lives Matter. And everyone around the table, if I said, hey, Black Lives Matter, if I said Chinese lives matter, white lives matter, we'd all be like, yes, of course, it's common sense. But be careful of when a phrase arrives from the left and it's common sense, because that's how they're able to usher in a lot of harm. They're very good at linguistics. They make things sound very appetizing. And then when you actually look into the fine print, it's something that's horrible, right? Planned Parenthood. I'm 6 months pregnant. Who doesn't want a Planned Parenthood? That sounds great. We should always plan ahead. But of course, we know Planned Parenthood is aborting babies. It's the same thing with Black Lives Matter. They say something that you can't disagree with. You should Planned Parenthood. Black lives do matter, but then you look into the fine print, and what is it? It's a push for Marxist principles. It's a push for reappropriation. It's a push for the breakdown of the nuclear family. I'm not assigning this to Black Lives Matter. You can visit their website today and go and look at what their explicit goals are that they state. They are after reversing a heteronormative society that's focused on the family. They believe all of those things need to be reversed. And they're also very focused on the trans agenda, which is totally bizarre. And nobody knows this. So Black trans lives matter is almost at the forefront of the Black Lives movement. the Black Lives Matter movement. And that, again, is what I always caution people. If it sounds really great and it sounds like something you can't disagree with, it probably was something that was thought up by the left because they want people to get behind them, even though they know that their goals are something that people would never get behind.
Yeah, and you know what people don't realize? I've tried to tell them, and I've looked at these three ladies that started Black Lives Matter, studying their background. First of all, they acknowledge they're Marxists.
That's correct.
But when you really get down to it, the two things they push, of course, is Marxism. They want to overthrow the capitalist system. But really, their movement is not about bettering the lives of any minority.
No.
It is pushing a sexual narrative of lesbianism, transgenderism, the whole LGBT, well, I forget all the letters, I call them the alphabet.
LGBTQ+.
Yeah. And that's really what it is. It is a radical changing of America where transgenderism, where lesbianism, homosexuality, they become the norm and they have the power.
Right. And what should alarm everybody, and I say this all the time, Black Lives Matter gains and raise billions and billions of dollars every time a black person dies. We're just the forefront of the store, right? And yet nobody knows where the money goes.
Exactly.
I can't imagine, as me being someone that runs a Blexit organization, of not having to submit my financials, of ever being able to get away with collecting billions of dollars, and the people that are giving the money don't ask, do you have offices? Do you have employees? Where are you based? Or is there a campus? Is there a sculpture? I mean, is there anything? And the answer is no. There is nothing. There isn't a school. They keep saying that this is about black lives. How are the billions of dollars that they've raised being injected into the black community? The answer is it isn't. So for them, as is true of the Democratic Party and all things leftism, black people are a conduit for them to accomplish further goals. So they use black pain, black emotion, black anger, and then they accomplish whatever it is they're after accomplishing. And that should be the biggest question. The Department of Justice should be on this. Where does the money go when you donate to Black Lives Matter?
Good question. Have you gotten an answer?
We have not yet, but I will keep asking it, and I know that there are some people with a lot more resources than I have.
We're going to ask that more often, too.
Yes.
Well, they have to pay those protesters somehow.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
So, that's what we have to show for it, pretty much.
Marxism, yeah.
And Marxism, to that point, that was one of the salient, as we all know, points of Marxism, is that the proletariat, those who are being oppressed by this upper class, in this case, I guess, white privilege, that they have to radically go out and demonstrate. And it's not just holding up signs. It is that they take action and destroy and take and loot and actually deconstruct in their own communities. That's the irony of this. The buildings they're burning down are in black communities.
Right.
Black business owners.
Right.
Where are their minds?
Right.
Where are their minds?
You know,
And Josh, they're putting people, they're burning their businesses that people have worked all of their lives.
Exactly.
All
It's
of their
heartbreaking,
lives.
really. You know,
You've seen them in tears.
you're familiar with this Kim Klacik.
Yes.
You know, she is doing something phenomenal for the city of Baltimore, trying. And I saw a couple of her commercials and seeing how that whole city has been destroyed. And she's trying to bring it back. And her tagline, of course, Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter. How, looking at this statement, how can one look at this statement, Black Lives Matter, yes, but all lives matter? How can that be considered racist?
It's not racist. You know, what it is they call that racist. They say, if you say any other life matters, it's somehow racist and is indicative of your hatred for Black America, and that isn't true. It's just a way for them to shut down speech. And that's what the left is always after when they use the word racism, because does anybody even know what racism means anymore? It just means the left disagrees with what you're saying.
Don't you feel like we're being pushed as a country into being racist, but yet nobody, like I don't know anybody personally that's a racist.
And I agree. I mean, it doesn't exist. And I mean, racism, of course, you're always going to have pockets of race everywhere. But this idea that America is a systemically racist country, it doesn't exist. And of course, there's going to be people that I know, people that are black, that harbor ill will towards white people. And I'm sure there are white people that harbor ill will towards black people. But it is not a system. It is not commonplace in this country. And yet you have Black Lives Matter trying to foster that narrative. And in the process, ironically, creating racism, teaching racism, teaching kids to see color. I mean, there really should be people standing up against this. I know if my kid ever went into school, and this is the test I tell everyone to do at home, if you want to know whether or not something's racist, just switch the race on the tagline, right? So I will read an article that says, white people just shut up. It'll be a BuzzFeed article. White people need to just shut up. And I asked myself, would this statement be racist if the article was entitled, Black People Just Shut Up? Of course it would be racist, right? Because it is racist.
Right.
Would you be happy if your child at school had to go around and say why they felt guilty for the color of their skin? They do this now for white privilege.
Right.
Why do you feel bad for being white? And they teach kids to go around and do that. Well, imagine a black child today being put into school and being taught to say why they feel bad for being black. This is racism, and people just can't see it. Somehow we've conditioned it's okay to be racist towards white people today, and it's pointedly ridiculous.
Right. Who's pushing that narrative?
Yeah, I mean, the leftists. The left is absolutely after that, and it goes back to what you were saying about the true core of Marxism, the proletariat argument, the verses, right? If you're poor, your grievance should be with white people, even though it's nonsensical.
Right.
If you're black, your grievance should be with white people. If you're short, it should be with tall people. If you're fat, it's because of skinny people. And it seems funny, but this is what they're doing. So now you've got really fat girls are being promoted in health magazines because there's now something wrong with being healthy.
Right.
Health is even wrong.
Right, yeah.
And that's just all about undoing the fabric of our society.
Yeah. So, Candace, I live in Marxist New York. That's a good term. It's now a scary place. And they were showing some scenes on television this morning from New York. It is a scary place.
Yeah.
But it says that it's a scary place now with de Blasco and an activist and Marxist. He's not a liberal. Como, who thinks he is the king when there's only one king, Jesus. I'm kind of trapped here with these totalitarian rulers. God help America if Harris becomes president, because Biden is just going to be propped up to have a grandpa image to throw at white America. All of us must pray for Trump, the Constitution, and the free market. Now, this one is from Carl Brown. He's one of our panelists here. When he's in town, he travels a lot, and just loves you to death, Candace. I am just so sorry Carl could not be with us today. But he said, I'm traveling, and I'm disappointed that I cannot be on the program. Candace, I'd like to ask if you have had encounters with black ministers, and if any of these encounters were negative. And can you address black church leaders on their backing and support of the Democratic Party? We have a lot of black churches today backing this liberal movement in our nation. Can you address that a little bit?
Yes, I mean, I've spoken at events with black pastors, so there are some of them that are doing God's work in terms of pushing back against this leftist narrative. But unfortunately, we know that there is a large group of them that are doing just the opposite. So, talking about the churches, it's a tricky spot. And if you actually look at the history of the Democratic Party, they always understood, and I talk about this in my book, that the churches were a way that you could poison black minds very simply, because if there's one thing that the black community has always had a strong relationship with, it is their faith, their personal faith, God, and from the times of slavery. I talk about that in my chapter on faith. Black Americans have always faith has always been most important. We are, in America, the most faithful community. And so when you look at that, and then you look at the progressive era of the 1920s, and you look at Margaret Sanger and abortion.
Right.
Well, abortion, as crazy as it sounds, was an idea that perpetuated within the black community through the ministers, through the churches. Right. Margaret Sanger sat down and methodically approached that we know the one thing black people listen to are their ministers, so we need to go to the ministers. She talks about this in a letter to Charles Gamble and tell them that this is what they need to be preaching. So the left has developed, I wouldn't say a complete stranglehold, but they definitely have a hold on a lot of the black churches, whether that is backed by, a fiscal reason, a financial incentive. You get a lot of black pastors that will not want to deal with me publicly because I think they're ashamed. I think they know. I think they know if they've sold out their community, and worse than selling out their community, turn their back on God, turn their back on Scripture, turn their back on the Bible. What their very existence is for is to fight against this. It is Satan that is the author of lies. It is Satan that is the author of deception. And you have allowed lies and deception to be put into the minds of black people for whatever your personal gain was and your own personal incentive. So it's incumbent upon us to have that conversation and to be honest, and to say that for as much good as the church has done in the world, when the church is manipulated, it is scary how fast evil can pass through it.
You know, on that note, one of the salient message of the day in many churches, especially amongst younger generations, is social justice.
Right.
In fact, even looking at some of the seminaries and some of the master's programs and even doctorates in theology, social justice is becoming a degree. That, along with focus on climate change, those are seemingly the two top issues in the minds of young people today. But the churches are preaching social justice. That's the modern day crusade. So what do we expect? We're simply reliving the past, just in a different packaging. Right. Social justice is the narrative.
Yeah, I live in Washington, D.C., and I live close to a lot of churches, and I am shocked. LGBT flags, Black Lives Matter flags on the churches. I mean, the idea of a church having an LGBT flag on it, it's unconscionable.
Yes.
Don't call yourself a church, you know, and that's what it comes down to. Don't call yourself a church. Don't let God be the front, and then be preaching this Marxist, anti-atheist stuff. And I almost wish I could sit down and just say, how did you put this flag up? How did you put up a flag that stands for a symbol of men can be women and women can be men? Right. And that, again, going back to Satan, that is a lie, that is a deception. So it is scary, but I see this more in the inner cities than anywhere else. So we know that the inner cities kind of just become like the playground for all things Marxist and leftist. And I have a deep faith, and I think that God is intervening, and we're going to win this thing.
Yeah, you know, that's a great comment that you just made there, and a question. This email quickly concerning the Democratic Party. I have not gotten to talk as much as I wanted to about the Democratic Party. And I want to ask this. Since the Black community has been so involved with the Democratic community, has it been good or bad?
It has been an absolute disaster for Black America by every single metric. When we were faithful Republican voters, things were great, things were going up, and the more that Democrats got involved, the more the government got involved, the worse things got economically for Black America, the worse things got familially for Black America. I mean, there isn't a single metric that you can look at and say things got better once Democrats got involved. There was just this idea that because a Democrat inked the Civil Rights bill, the Civil Rights Act in 1964, a Democrat who actually was an avowed racist and hated Black Americans and proved that through his record in the Senate. Lyndon Baines Johnson voted against every Black progress bill that hit his desk. He was part of the old Southern Democrat racist bloc for 20+ years, voted against every piece of legislation that was for Black America, and then basically, with a figurative gun to his head, had to sign the Civil Rights Act because of the protests and the riots that were happening after the passing of JFK. Yeah. People don't know that about him, and I put a lot of that in my book to show you that the Democrats have done nothing for you, even the illusory concept of signing the Civil Rights Act.
I do have one question real quick before we take our break. There is a lot of people that call the president a racist. I mean, I get it on my social media feed. I mean, the moment that I announced, certain things that were said about President Trump, all that many of the African-American community will message me back and say, well, he's a racist. What do you say to those that are watching right now, that are listening, that believe that he is a racist, but yet you've stated publicly you support him?
Right. I would say you're being brainwashed by the media. That propaganda is real. If you study propaganda throughout many other nations, it is very real. If the media tells you something enough times, you will suddenly believe it's real. We saw this with people actually believing COVID-19 was going to be the end of civilization.
Right,
millions.
exactly.
It was a death ticker every day.
Yes.
Social distancing, social distancing, social distancing. And suddenly you had people that didn't want to see their moms, dad, cousins, brothers, because they thought it was the end of the world. Use that example to make you understand that the media, which is devilish in nature, is doing the same thing for Trump. They just kept calling him a racist, and they haven't produced one data point. He's been in office for 4 years. If he was a racist, what policies did he push through? Right. And then just challenge yourself to ask the question, what has he actually done to prove that he's a racist? What has he actually said, other than the truth, by asking Black America, what do you have to lose, and talking about the condition of our communities, that is pointed to the fact that he is racist. It doesn't exist. It exists nowhere but in the capacity of the media to transform
And
minds.
no one talks about what the president has done for the Black community.
Many things, and that's why I support him.
I mean, it's not only many things, it's more than they've had all of these years being faithful to the Democratic Party. He's done more in his 4 years of time in the presidential office for the Black community. We could give you a whole list
Jobs
of
alone
things.
speak volumes.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, then
Jobs
Obama.
alone.
Yeah,
Obama
right.
was in there for 8 years. You had a Black president for 8 years, and you have a favorable opinion of him. Ask yourself the same question. Is it media brainwash? Is that why you have a favorable opinion of Obama? The answer is yes, because the media loved Obama, and they made you think that he was doing stuff for the Black community when, in fact, he did absolutely nothing.
Right.
There was not a single metric that went up in the Black community when Barack Obama was your president. He did nothing but be Black, right? And show up every day. And we were doing worse. So, people really should study psychology. People should study propaganda. And there is something to, if you say it enough times, people will believe it to be true. And unfortunately, that is what's happened.
It's amazing that he's the only president, I'm not say the only, but he's the only racist that won an NAACP award. Now you go figure on that one.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
And Gabriel, we've got to take a quick break. And Candace, we're going to have to get you on this program more often, because we can do some good, I think. But we got to go to a quick break. And after the break, we are going to be taking your calls. And if you are in your car driving or you don't want to call, if you send me an email, I will read the question to Candace, and let her answer the question. So we're going to go to a break. I'm going to give you the telephone number, whether you agree with what we're saying or disagree with it. Feel free to call. We would be happy to discuss it with you. And that number is 800-342-8430. We'll be right back. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back with our special guest today, Candace Owens, and we're so glad to have you. I was just looking at my phone, Candace. My best friend is texting me and telling me, he said, this is one of the greatest programs you've ever done. And here's another quote, said, this program needs to be hand-delivered to President Trump. And so I think he would appreciate what's being said. Candace, let me read you what we have some questions, so let me begin with that. It said, today for current events, our multi-grade class is watching your program with Candace Owens, and the students have some questions. What do you think of the LGBTQ movement? It's three of them, so I'll give them to you one at a time. A class of multi-grade children watching the program. So what do you say? What do you think of LGBTQ?
Yes, I have asserted myself very publicly as an enemy of the LGBTQIA, I think, agenda. Because it is teaching lies, and ultimately what it will lead to is the breakdown of family. And I am particularly the strongest against the trans agenda. They have it out for me, and that's totally fine, because I will not exist in a world that is deceptive. I will not exist in a world that encourages young children to mutilate their bodies.
Right.
That is evil. That is pure evil. And we are seeing more and more that children are becoming the subject of the leftist agenda. We're seeing more and more that they are being victimized in the school system. First, we saw our children being sexualized, and there's actually a great book by Thomas Sowell about the dogma of the leftist education, this idea that kids were doing it anyways, so it's fine to teach sex at a very young age. It actually was incorrect. If you look at the statistics of how many kids were graduating with their virginity in the early 1970s and what changed in one decade once they started teaching about sexuality. The whole point of these movements and the whole point of the reason why this poison is being pushed through the education system is because it seeks to undermine the parents. Again, it seeks to say you don't have to listen to your parents. They don't know what's cool. They're part of an older generation. Even us as millennials now, our values are outdated according to the public school system. I'm a monster because I don't think children can pick their gender. I think God chooses your gender, and at birth you are given a gender. and that there are differences, qualitative differences between men and women, both high quality. We need women, we need men. There is no society that can survive without strong men, and we see this wimping of men in our culture, telling men that they should be more effeminate, that men, it's okay if you want to act or dress like a girl for one day, and at the same time telling women that they shouldn't aspire to maternal instincts, that you shouldn't aspire to have kids, that you should want to climb the corporate ladder, and all of these things are against the way that against God's design. There is a perfect yin and yang. And that is God's design. And it is beautiful, and it should be protected, and it is sacred.
Right.
So I will never be for the LGBTQIA adding more letters every day agenda. And if you are a person that thinks, oh, well, this is going to be okay, they just want this. Well, a few years ago, it was gay marriage. And it was, once we get gay marriage, everything's going to be absolutely fine. How quickly we moved from gay marriage to kids to can pick their gender, to pedophilia, to condoning drag queen story time, and saying that if you're not okay with a man dressed as a woman dancing in front of your child, you're a bigot. If you need to call me a bigot, so that I can get the truth out. I'm perfectly comfortable with the name calling. I've been called every name under the sun. I view it as a game of Pokemon. I've got to catch them all. We should all be strong in speaking out against this, because it is satanic.
Now, Candace, if I could bring a point on this, I feel part of their agenda is to extend civil rights to this group, so that if you say something against the LGBTQ, and I'll just say plus community, you are now not just a bigot, but you are guilty of a hate crime. This would come directly against the conservative, the traditional, and the Christian community, because the Word of God, the Bible, speaks on the issue. And so now they're able to extend rights, and then also now call those in opposition guilty of hate crime, which can bring a lot of problems. So I feel that is part of their agenda. I don't know if you agree with that.
Right. Of course, their agenda is always to persecute Christians, to persecute faith. That's always been a part of the Marxist agenda. The undoing of society, make everybody hate one another, and then to make it seem that the people that are telling the truth are the people that are lying, and vice versa. And there is nothing more, I think, strong, by the way, than the LGBT agenda. I mean, look at the strength that they have. J.K. Rowling has been canceled, like the writer of Harry Potter, and she was a woke leftist.
Yes, right.
And all she said was that, I believe that there is a difference between men and women. Think about how scary it is when someone of her position and with her power and with her influence can't acknowledge that there are fundamental biological difference between men and women. That is being considered an essential hate crime to say that, right? And though they're not prosecuting it yet, yes, you're exactly correct.
In the court of public opinion, they are.
In the court of public opinion, they are. And the school system, they're now providing, for those of you that don't know how serious this issue is, in California, in certain districts, they are saying that they are allowed to, if your child's name is Brian and Brian was born a boy and you've been calling him Brian your whole life, when he gets into kindergarten and first grade, they can tell him he's a different gender and call him Sarah all day, and they are not required to tell the parents. It is protected under the LGBT bubble. So it means it's like going to school and telling your teacher you're gay. The teacher is not allowed to tell the parent, and it's a safe space. But they're projecting that onto your kids. So it's a part of it is a part of their agenda. They will literally, your child will be in school and they'll be like, oh, your name's Brian. Well, but have you ever felt like a Sarah today, Brian? And they're manipulating children, and they're confusing children, and again, undermining parents, and doing this because parents are not aware that it's happening. So I'm happy to use my platform to speak out against it. I'm happy to assert myself as an enemy of it, because I think we need to first and foremost protect our children.
You know what I say? God made man, he made woman, and he performed the first wedding ceremony and gave them instructions to replenish the earth. And that's it right there. That's it. So,
another thing they've done, if I could just interject too, is they have made this differentiation. They've separated sexual preference and sexual identity and gender identity. They're making gender into this whole other thing, making very separate the two, which has created an even bigger narrative. And so that's where I grow again very concerned, because the younger generations, they're being introduced to this, taught this, just like racism. There's no child. I've got 2 little boys. They go to the park and play with all the kids there. Yeah. It doesn't matter their color. You have to be taught to hate, taught racism. Now they're doing this, stealing away the very innocence of our children. If they're not successful stealing their life through abortion, they're going to take their innocence and pervert their minds and open them up to this narrative.
And
so what you're speaking about is very important.
And you can never get it back. You know, I did an episode on my show, which I encourage people to watch, the Candace Owens show. And it was with a man named Walt Heyer. If there's one episode that I wish every person would watch, it was with Walt Heyer, who is, born a man, lived his life as a man.
He's been a guest here.
He's been a guest here. I mean, his story and his power and his testimony to how it all happened and how society did this to him, you can't go back. Once a child mutilates themselves, they can't have children. Right. And it is so dangerous and scary to see that they are after this. And you're right about, blending the lines between sexual preference and gender. I always say, what does being a lesbian have anything to do with transgender?
Exactly.
And of course, gender dysphoria, it exists.
Right.
But that should be treated as an illness. It should be treated as a mental disorder because your mental is out of order with your physical. In the same way that, someone who's bipolar, someone who's schizophrenic, if I came in here and I said, I'm Superman, I wouldn't place it incumbent upon you guys to all treat me like I'm Clark Kent and to pretend that I am. It would mean that I had a mental disorder. And society is so okay addressing all of the other mental disorders. You're so okay saying there's something wrong with anorexics. They are body dysmorphic, and that exists. I was anorexic. I talk about that in my book. And society says this is a condition and it's wrong. And society is right. Anorexia is a mental disorder, and it is a condition, and it is wrong, and you have to get healthy. But we don't do that when it comes to gender dysphoria. We say there's nothing wrong with gender dysphoria. Society is wrong. Let's transform society to pretend that you're right. Imagine that world under using the anorexia analogy. Imagine a world in which you would have to say to me when I wasn't anorexic, yes, Candace, you are very fat. Yes, you are correct. That would be crazy.
Exactly.
You would want me to get better.
We would be aiding and abetting your demise.
You would be aiding and abetting my demise, and that's exactly what we're doing with people that have, gender issues.
Yes. All right, Candace, this is from Ottawa Christian Academy in Ottawa, Illinois. This is the group of students that are watching. Said, Candace, how many famous people have you gone up against? I thought that's just like what would come from.
I have no issue with fame. I have a lot of issues with stupidity. So if you are famous and you're using your platform to do whatever it is, the reason that you're famous for, great. When you're actually just trying to do good, great. When you are now becoming a person that's transforming young minds and you believe that because you're fame, somehow it qualifies you to do everything. I've got a certain element of fame. Do I think that I should be walking in and telling Elon Musk how to build rockets?
Right.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Elon Musk, I've got 2.5 million Twitter followers. So put that here.
Yeah.
It's just as foolish to think that, a basketball player or a singer is somehow has the authority or possesses the intellect to tell you how to vote or how to live your life. And for some reason, people are unable to realize that because of, as we spoke about earlier, this heightening of Hollywood for us, this idolatry of Hollywood figures.
All right, this is one more question. Did you get good grades in school or bad grades because of your color?
I got good grades and I got bad grades, and none of it had to do with my color. I was a remarkable student at English and reading and writing, and I was not good at math. And I'll tell you, it had nothing to do with my color. It had to do with how much effort I put into it.
Same here.
Right. Thank God for calculators.
All right, let's go to Rick from Pennsylvania and take one call right now. Rick, welcome to Sun Life Broadcasting. You have a question or comment?
Yes, I'm from Ohio.
Oh, okay, they have the wrong. All right, good. Rick from Ohio.
Yes, I guess, Candace, I know you had a kind of an incident with LeBron James, and he's from Ohio, and I was a huge NBA fan. I loved the playoffs, but not anymore. I just kind of got a sour taste when it comes to that. Has he responded back to you at all I guess after your response last week on, I guess, what privilege he has?
No, he hasn't responded, and that typically no response tends to be the response when I'm hitting at something that's accurate. LeBron James, my challenge to LeBron James is to simply tell children to live their lives, young children, young black children, the same way he did. He played by the rules. He got no special handouts. LeBron James became better than everybody else at basketball, not because every basket that he scored was worth 6 because of the color of his skin, but because he was actually better. You know, he practiced harder, he put in more hours, and yes, was he privileged in terms of his size? Again, going back to, did he have some God-given size that the rest of us maybe don't have? Yes, but he put in the work. So why would LeBron James get to where he is in life and then teach kids to do the exact opposite, to whine and complain and to say that it's because of the color of my skin? It's foolish. And that is the thing that connects all of these celebrities. All of them earned a certain amount of success by doing things the right way. And yet when they look backwards, they tell people that they can't. But you did. Why can't I if you did? And that's so harmful to be conditioning children to see themselves as victims because they'll never get ahead. And so he's almost enjoying a privilege while telling other people that they're never going to be able to have it. He's not dealing with racism by any stretch of an imagination. Right. As I said, the quote you're talking about is, I know that he's got white gardeners, white chefs. He doesn't touch his own door handles. He's got white security guards. So if LeBron James is dealing with racism, I just would like to have that in my life as well.
Exactly.
That's good. Okay, Geneva in Connecticut. Welcome to Sun Life Broadcasting. You have a question for Candace? Hello, Geneva.
Bye, Geneva. I don't think we've lost her.
We lost her.
She's gone.
We
Too
lost
bad.
her.
I'm from Connecticut,
Okay,
so.
JD in Pennsylvania. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, JD, you're on the
Can you
air.
hear me? Okay, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Hi, this question is for Candace Owens, and please, I'd like to say this. I have a compliment for the ministry. I want to tell you, the viewers, if I don't get that compliment in, it means the propaganda hung up on me. It doesn't mean I left the air. Now, I want to speak for the other side for just a few moments. I mean, you guys get all the people agreeing with you. I like to speak for the other side for just a moment. You can ask me any question you want. I'm an A student. I have a degree in statistics, and I want to let people know something about Barack Obama. Our first black president cut unemployment for black people. You can go to the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics, and you can look at a graph. I know Candace wasn't good at math. I was. I made A's in it. You can go to the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics. I'm looking at the graph right now. Unemployment was 16.8% in 2010. That's when Barack Obama and the liberals were fully in charge. They turned it around, Barack Obama and Biden turned it around, and it went all the way down to 7.8%, the lowest in decades.
Coming out of a recession. The Great Recession is the
Say that.
reason we had those numbers.
And by the way, I just want to say this because I find this to be true of the left. You don't always have to pack in an insult to make your point, you know, to say Candace wasn't good at math, but I was. It's not necessary. If we're having a conversation, we can keep it friendly. And yes, that is the correct answer, that he was coming out of a recession. And then also, if you're impressed by that, then I'd have to assume that the other side that you're on now is Trump, because Trump had unemployment for black Americans at the lowest it's ever been in this country ever. So that's quite the feat, which is, you know, something that should be talked about more. Barack Obama also had some other amazing statistics, more black people on welfare than ever. He had the highest food stamp rate, black Americans on food stamps, and the Black Caucus somehow cheered during his State of the Union address when he announced more welfare benefits for black Americans. They got on their feet and applauded, which means that we're talking about more government dependency for black Americans, which is what he was an expert at and what I believe that Donald Trump is reversing, and that's why I'm a huge supporter of his. But we thank you for your statistics, and we thank you for your insult, and we hope you have a great day.
Yep.
Okay, it said, Candace, you're one of the bravest, most truthful of all time for all Americans to listen and learn from, and our family loves you. I read that because we need to hear those once in a while when you're in the battle out here. Okay, I watched you, Candace, debate Leo Terrell more than once on Fox News. So what do you think of Leo now, leaving the Democratic Party and is now a Republican for Donald Trump? Now, we kind of brought this up at the beginning of the program concerning Leo Terrell, and if there's ever been a person on TV that's switched and made a turn, this man has. So you've debated him, you've been in his presence. What do you see about Leo Terrell?
I'm proud of him. You know, I think a lot of people are hesitant to believe it. I'm not. I mean, I know what it's like to to every single day have to wake up and lie to yourself and to see oppressions every day. It's exhausting, right? So Leo Tarot got to throw off a weight that he's been carrying his entire life. He feels like a free man. Right, he's running a marathon now because he's just and you can see it in his face, right? He seems happier. He was so miserable, and I was always so calm and so collected and smiling, and he was always so angry. Imagine that there are so many people that have to keep walking around with that weight of anger, that weight of victimhood. He
was always scowling.
Yeah, always scowling, and now he's like smiling.
He's liberated.
And you can see it in him, and I hope that his transformation inspires other people to go, you know what, I disagree with him, but look at how happy this person looks and feels. He's smiling.
I watched him on a social media clip last week, and it was a complete transformation. He had his MAGA hat on, but the main thing was that touting how much that the president has done for the African-American community. And you cannot fault that.
You can't dispute it.
You can't dispute that.
But why do they try to dispute it, Candace?
Because, you just become accustomed to seeing yourself, through one lens, and you believe that it's incumbent upon you. To be a real black person, you have to see yourself as oppressed. And by the way, that is in itself racist, to look at somebody's skin color and to dictate and to assign all of these attributes to them and how they have to view the world. And I think that, for Leo Tarot, he threw off that weight of victimhood.
He did.
He feels amazing. He looks amazing. And like I said, I hope that his transformation just inspires everybody else in America that is feeling this weight of victimhood to realize you can step into the American dream. You don't have to be other. You don't have to be oppressed. You don't have to be black. You get to be American. You get to go into every room and have something in common with every person and not see yourself as less than. I mean, our product is just better on the conservative side, right? We're inviting you into the big American family and vision of hard work and prosperity based on your choices and your actions. Yeah. I see myself as equal, and that is what bothers the left. Isn't that remarkable? I walk into a room and I don't see differences between me and you. I think we're all equal, and that drives them crazy. They want me to say, oh, well, let me tell you how I'm living as a black person that you'll never understand. It instantly makes you angry.
Okay, so that is one of the things that I get a lot on social media. You don't understand what we've been through. You don't understand our oppression.
They've been through nothing if they're alive in America today.
Exactly. when you grow up and they're my age.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all grown up in the same America, and yet they have not experienced the oppression that their forefathers experienced.
Well, it's how they're defining oppression.
But they're defining it.
Right.
How they're defining it's important.
Realize. It's the Democratic Party feels like they have to keep this racism going.
They have to.
They've got to keep it going to keep the black vote.
They want blacks to be a permanent underclass in America.
That's exactly
And because there are no barriers that exist for black Americans physically or legislatively, now they've pushed it to mentally. They're just teaching you that you are somehow oppressed. And they cannot stand people like me. They cannot stand people that are happy, people that see themselves as equals. They need it to go away. They need to stomp it out. It pains them that my book sold 100,000 copies in 24 hours, because that is the guide. That is saying to black Americans, you can do it. You are an equal. Let's take what's in front of us. Let's step inside of this American vision and dream.
For example, just today on one of my social media feeds, they're saying that they don't really care for you because you speak death to the black community.
Death, as in life, right?
Exactly.
The exact opposite. It's opposite day. I mean, that is the craziest thing. Every single day I wake up and I say, you can do it.
Absolutely.
Right? You can do whatever you want, in this country.
You can be what you want.
It's all about your character, and that's the Martin Luther King vision. Like, what he wanted it to be a society that judged people based on their character, the content of their character. And that is what I am preaching. I am saying, yes, based on your actions and your character, you can make it in this society. And people hate that. What sort of people hate that? People that are the real racists.
Absolutely.
People that need black Americans to be a permanent underclass because, and on the white side, it fulfills some sort of selfish, makes them feel better about themselves, like you're helping black Americans by seeing them as less than. Of course you're not helping black Americans by seeing them as less than.
Absolutely.
My challenge to Democrats is to stop demanding that I see myself as oppressed. I am your equal. If that makes you uncomfortable, you need to re-examine your own personal characteristics. You need to actually sit down and ask yourself, what is real racism? If I am not allowed to exist as a free black person that sees herself as an equal in your head and in your mind and in reality, and you hate me because I see myself as an equal, then there's something wrong with you, not me.
Right. That's exactly
Oh,
right.
yes.
So
That's the
slavery
answer right
does
there.
exist in this country today, from what you're saying.
Mental slavery.
Exactly.
Right.
It's different from physical, but what you've just described sounds like they're trying to enslave, and I think you wrote about this to your point, that blacks need to come off this modern-day plantation, that there is slavery in this nation in the sense you're talking about right now, but it's a choice.
It's a choice.
People can choose.
And I've
Blacks,
opted
whites,
out.
everyone can choose.
I look at like Terrence Williams, David Harris Jr., yourself, and I follow them on social media, and the insults that come at y'all from your own community, which it baffles my mind, where you get called every name in the book just because you are your own person.
Right. Yeah, and that is so true. The most racist things that have ever been said about me my entire life come from Black Americans who are caught under the spell of the Democrat Party because they cannot stand, the light of a Black conservative. When I say the light, I mean literally. When you watch David J. Harris, when you watch Terrence Williams, when you watch a Black conservative, there's a light. There's no anger. There's no bitterness. And I think for those reasons, that those people feel so angry because they're going, look at this person, they're so happy. Misery loves company.
Yes, it does.
Right? And
Yes,
I'm not here to give it any company.
Well, what blows my mind, whether it's Brandon Tatum or whoever, we should applaud someone who makes something out of their life that is not dependent upon welfare, that is not dependent on somebody, well, we're going to give you this because you can't do it for yourself. But then instead of saying, no, I'm here, I'm valuable, I'm going to make something out of my life. And so instead of them being a role model, they tear them down and call them Uncle Toms.
I'm glad you brought up Brendan Tatum because he's my co-founder at Blexit,
Right.
and he is just such a wonderful human being. He warms the room, as soon as he steps into it. And that's what we were building, a coalition of Black conservatives that are happy, right? That right now, it is fundamentally not okay in this country to be a happy Black American.
Right.
Think about that.
Right.
Think about that. You have to, the only way you're allowed to be Black is to be miserable, is to say you're oppressed. Even if you're LeBron James and you live in a $100 million mansion in Bel Air being built for you, you still, your only position in life is to say that you're oppressed. That is ridiculous, right? I mean, think about how fundamentally racist that is.
That is, right. Good point. Racist is what it is.
I know we have to take a break, but I want to ask this question. This is from one of my college buddies. His name is Herman, and he's asking me to ask you about what is your take on taking the knee during the anthem?
It is so incredibly disrespectful. And the reason for that is because they no longer, as I said, they no longer honor the flag in the school system. They're being taught that Americans are oppressors everywhere in the world. So what you're giving birth to is a generation of people, millennial and beneath, right, that actually have disrespect and hate for our military, people that give them their freedoms. They are no longer being, no longer being taught World War II as this amazing accomplishment that we put an end to. We are seen as oppressors. We are seeing ourselves as oppressors, and that's being actively taught in the school system. So it is a natural progression, right, that disrespecting the flag and getting on one knee is the right thing to do. Now, the idea here is that it was, giving air or showing an example of police brutality. It makes absolutely no sense because if you look at the statistics, white Americans are killed by rape more often by police officers than Black Americans, as are Hispanic men, right? So a police officer is actually less likely to shoot and kill a Black person than they are to shoot and kill a white person or a Hispanic man. And the reason for that is because they're trigger shy because they're so afraid of being called racist. An actual Black economist did that study, and I advise you guys all find it. Heather McDonald did a great book on it and just completely slaughtered the police brutality. It's a myth. So this entire thing started on a myth. Even if it wasn't a myth, let's say there was police brutality every single day towards Black Americans. What does kneeling and respecting the veterans and the troops that give you your freedom, that give you the right to make millions of dollars as a Black man throwing around a football have to do with this? Have some respect. And this is what happens when we pull away from a patriotic society, when patriotism almost becomes synonymous with racism.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Patriotism. I mean, literally, they're going, how could we possibly be patriots? How could we possibly love our country? Again, going back to that nucleus of misery, hating everything about your society. I choose to love it. If you're ever in a room with patriots, you'll never feel more loved because it doesn't matter your color, your race, your ethnicity. You know, what unites us all is this vision, the red, white, and blue of this country, the freedoms that we preserve and protect and fight for every single day.
Yeah. You know, we were having a program like this here some months ago, and one of the people that called in asked the question, said, Francis, you know, why are we having this program, racism? Well, you know, we're all marrying each other nowadays.
Yeah.
We're past all of that. And in essence, that should be the truth.
Right.
Right, because they are. There are intermarriages and all so forth. You know, and I keep talking. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back after the break. Email that I want to share with Candace and with our audience. And, you know, I'm just getting email after email, and they're all positive. Just so thankful for you taking the stand. But let me read this question to you. It says, when I said, thanks, Francis and panel, and I pray to God for you and especially your guest, Candace, every day. And I have a question. When I ask my black friends, what did Obama do for the black people, the only answer I get is he became president. So when I continue to ask and say, okay, but what did he actually do for his own people? The answer is the Republicans didn't let him do what he wanted to do. I get so upset, and I don't know how to react calmly. And can you answer that question, Candace? What did Obama do for the blacks?
He didn't do anything. And I would say to that person, when they bring up that repeated argument, the Republicans didn't let him do what he wanted to do, ask them for more details, because that's about where they stop, because that is just literally the propaganda. It's what the media says, but there's no evidence to support that. So the question is, what did Obama want to do that the Republicans stopped him from doing? What did he attempt to do that the Republicans stopped him from doing? And they can't answer that question, you know, because it doesn't exist, right? Everything that he did was harmful. I mean, I think what they tried aloud as the greatest win would have been health care for all, Obamacare, which was horrible. You know, and people don't understand just how horrible that is, and how it's led to, you know, all of these increases that we're seeing today. And, you know, we're hopeful that Trump is going to reverse that. But Barack Obama did nothing but be black. And people ask me, do you regret a Barack Obama presidency? And my answer is no. I am happy Barack Obama won. Very happy Barack Obama won. And I was liberal then. I cried when Barack Obama won. And I'm glad he did it, because it no longer allows the left to use the argument, even though they do, that America is a racist country. It strips that away. People keep forgetting that it was those people that voted for Trump, those counties that voted for Trump, voted for Barack Obama in 2008. So this idea that these people are racist because they vote for Trump, and yet they are the only reason that Obama was president. Let me issue you a huge reminder, Black America. We are only 13% of the population. There is no president that can get into office without overwhelming support from the white community. So we had a first black president because white America and black America together voted to put him into that office twice. And so this whole idea that, like, you know, suddenly we're going backwards and we got to Trump. The reason why we got to Trump after Obama is because Obama let so many people down, because they believed in him, because they believed in that vision, because we actually thought this was going to heal race issues, and it did the exact opposite, right? He aggravated race issues on his way out. If you go back and look at the clips of him running, it is so remarkable how much he changed his language in just 8 years. When he was running and they asked him about being the first black president, he said, I'm not running because I want people to vote for me because I'm black. I'm paraphrasing here. But he said something very powerful. He says, I hope when people vote for me, it's because they believe in my vision. And that's what happened. People believed in his vision, and his vision turned out to be a lie. And then on his way out, he started, you know, feeding all of these lies about the police, about race issues. And what a hypocrite to be standing as the first black president of America and going out on that note and not being grateful, you know, for everything that you represented to America. He's a massive letdown, and people, you know, he's a lesson to all of us. You don't vote for somebody because of the color of their skin. You don't vote for somebody because of their gender. You vote for them based on their policies. You vote for them based on, you know, their character, and not because of their gender, not because, you know, I'm a woman and I'm with her. but because this person is actually going to defend and fight for American liberties.
You know, when people asked me about Barack Obama, when he got elected, I was glad he got elected. Now I'm thinking he could do a lot for this country, not only to heal the racial issue, but do a lot for his people, to pull them up out of the poverty and things like that. But we saw the very opposite. He had an agenda.
Right.
This is me talking now. And I felt like that agenda was to help destroy America and the American way of life as we know it. And his agenda was what I cannot accept.
Right.
Right.
And, all right, it said...
Well, Sister Francis, if I could just interject. Candace, what you said just now is so essential coming up to this election. People must vote on the issues.
Yes.
I actually spoke with so many over the years, and I was at President Obama's first inauguration in Washington, D.C. It was incredible. I was much younger then, of course, but it was incredible to see that. There was a sense of pride to know that America has come a long way in such a short time when you consider how young we are. There are streets in England that are older, in Europe that are older than our nation.
Right, exactly.
So to see that is phenomenal. But how many did I speak to, black Americans that are Christians, that said, I voted just because he was black. I knew better, and I've had to since repent. And it precipitated them voting for President Trump. Coming up on this election, though, we're not out of this yet. We've still got the potential issue of gender and color, where people will be skewed to vote in a particular manner, not even because of party, just gender and color.
That's correct.
And so what you said, I hope that they heard it. I hope they heard it loud and clear. It must be on the issues.
Vote your values. It's that simple. What are your values? Do you believe in Marxism? Do you believe in taking away free markets, take away capitalism? If you believe in this agenda of children being told that they can pick their genders and confusing children and gender mutilation, for children that are young and parents signing off on this. If you are against God, if you believe in faithlessness, if you're a part of that group of people that thinks congressmen should not be swearing on the Bible, that the flag needs to go away, that we need to stop saying Merry Christmas, then by all means vote for the left, right? But if you believe that this country is good, is basically fundamentally good, if you believe in God, if you believe in faith, if you believe, for the love of God, in family, right? If you believe in the vision that we all wanted to believe in when we elected Barack Obama to be the president, then it is necessary and incumbent upon you to vote for Donald J. Trump. Because these are the two visions right now that you're up against. So you have to vote for one and you have to vote for the other. And I cannot see how anybody can justify a vote for the Marxist left. But your vote is your right. So
for now.
But you know what you just said. American people are basically good people.
Yeah.
America is a great nation. Americans people are
and
great
they know
people.
that we build walls. I mean, the irony of a left is they say we're this horrible country, right? And we're racist and we're sexist and we're misogynist, and yet they're demanding that we can't build a wall at our border, right? If we're so horrible and sexist and racist and awful, why are people trying to get in?
Exactly.
Why do we even have to have this debate about how many people we have to let into our country? If Africa's so great and we took you from your ancestors in Africa, why are Africans trying to get to America if we're this racist of a country? Why do you see so many of them trying to say, please, give me my citizenship, I want to live here? Why is it that in capitalist countries we have to build walls to keep people out, and yet in socialist countries they have to keep walls to keep people in, like Venezuela? These are important questions. It's because the concept, Western principles, the West is the best in terms of the principles that we have here. Are we a perfect nation? No, because we're human. We're human and we're imperfectible, right? And if you read the Bible, you know that. We are never going to be perfect. Don't let the left convince you that under, of all things, a Marxist narrative, we're going to be a perfect nation.
Utopia.
Yeah,
Exactly.
utopia doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
Why can't we talk about how great America is? Why can't we talk about the goodness of the American people and leave race out of it? Why?
Because they need
we
that
have all
hate and
different
that
races.
narrative to keep their agenda going.
Yeah.
That's why.
Listen to this.
But the reality is, as someone who's been nearly 100 countries, wherever there's suffering, you'll find America. Where there's a natural disaster, the first country to arrive on the scene to render aid is America.
Right.
Whenever there's oppression, there's America. And, and it comes down to, as Colin Powell said, we have fought and seen our boys die all over the world to defend freedom and to liberate countries. And we've never asked those countries for one thing except for a piece of property to bury our dead. That's America.
Yes, and you know, when I've been overseas and I've been down, because we've done a lot of work in different countries in the world, and I've been down at the dock where they're loading, these ships come in, and you see the American products coming off of those ships, huge containers from America to help those people in that country. And I'm standing there and I'm so proud of my country and for the people of America that we love God first and we love our country second. I'd love to talk about that instead of white privilege.
Well,
Look at the words you're using. I love, right? Happy emotions.
Yes.
Patriotism, it instills happiness, right? Marxists, it's the exact opposite. They will tell you what they hate because you know what? It is like Winston Churchill said. Socialism, Marxism, it is the doctrine of greed, of envy, and of hate.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about, capitalism, free markets, love of country, patriotism, pride, that is happiness, right? It fills you with pride. You're talking about how proud you are. These are all good emotions. Marxists don't have or possess good emotions.
And I wasn't thinking about we have a diverse nation. We have all kinds of races here, and they're Americans.
Right.
Unless they choose not to be, like which we've got those in the streets that are burning buildings and those kicking in windows and burning police cars.
Hate, anger.
Yeah.
Now, Candace, there's a narrative going around that a lot of younger people have bought, and that is that everything that's good about America that you can find, our infrastructure even, everything, was all built on the backs of slaves.
That's right.
And therefore, white privilege is the issue of the day there. So what would you say to that narrative? Because as you know, in young people, that is a predominant thought.
They're so uneducated. It pains me. And I mean, there's so many books that they should have to read to actually learn about slavery and how relative to the entire population, how few slaves we actually had. Here's the irony. They say that America was built by slaves, right? And yet we can all acknowledge that the North progressed a lot faster than the South, and the North didn't have slaves. Why is that? Because actually slavery got in the way of free market and capitalism. It got in the way of invention. Once they abolished slavery, America was able to take off because they had to build machinery to replace the human capital. So slavery actually slowed down progress in the South, and that's why the North was so ahead. That's just a fact. It makes people uncomfortable. You know the men that built America. You're talking about, you know, the Vanderbilts. When we had the technological boom, right, at the end of the 19th century, that's when things started happening. Andrew Carnegie with steel, right? Yeah. When we traversed into a technological nation, which means, okay, we need less human capital, we need more machinery, that is when America took off. And it's just so foolish to say that America was built by slavery. Was slavery wrong? Of course, we know it was wrong, right? But to pretend that 400 years later, everything that you see, this was built by slavery, I mean, it's just so foolish. And then also, I just want to remind Americans, because this is probably the most frustrating point when you're talking about slavery, is that there's some weird idea in the minds of Americans that slavery happened here first, that the world started in 1619. No, it did not happen here first. Slavery was way worse. Actually, the worst, if you're talking about the Atlantic slave trade, was in Brazil in terms of the treatment of Americans. And the most important thing that you should know is that slavery was everywhere in the world. It actually started in North Africa, right? Which is the irony of people keep saying they want to get back to Africa. Know that slavery still exists. It still exists in Africa. If you're talking about Ghana and you're talking about the Lake region, Lake Malta, I believe it's called, they still have child slavery. It is still okay in Africa and parts of Africa to be a slave. And also know that the first people that abolished slavery on the face of this planet were white men. Okay, it was France, followed by the UK, followed by America, and ending the abhorrent practice of slavery. So you be very careful when you disrespect the First Nations, right, that actually got rid of it. And why did they get rid of it? Why was the West the first to get rid of it? Why were English-speaking nations the first to get rid of it, with the exception of France? Because they believed in faith and they believed in God, and they finally realized that it no longer lined up to their faith. For the institution of slavery to go on. So that thing you're trying to get rid of, the Christians, the evil Catholics and Christians, all right, maybe have a little bit more respect for the institutions that got rid of the abhorrent practice of slavery and got it right for the first time in this country.
Exactly. Candace, thank you for taking the stand that you've taken For the past few years, I've started to pay more and more attention to the political climate in the United States, and I've found everything that you stand for to be the truth. As a black police officer, and sir, I'm so thankful that you're watching the program.
Yes, absolutely.
We appreciate the police force in America today, and we realize that every morning when you get up, you never know whether you'll come home that night or not. And we pray for you, and we respect you, and hold you up in what you're doing for your job and for this country. But it says, as a black police officer, I see it every day. There is a great lack of accountability and responsibility, especially with people from our generation and younger. But I believe that a lot of us are waking up because of people like you, Candace, who are not afraid to tell the truth. Thank you for having, Frances, for having her on this awesome program.
Well, thank you, and I agree with you. I mean, his job is much tougher than my job. I wake up, I have to tell the truth. He has to wake up and live the lies.
Exactly.
And that's a way scarier position to be in, to wake up every day and know that there is a narrative that is being spun, a satanic narrative against what you do and the sacrifices. And to the point of him being a black police officer, again, a lack of education in these inner cities, in the worst crime-ridden areas of our country, they are a majority black police officers. When you're talking about Chicago district, I think it's District 11 that has the most shootings. I went and met with them. They're all black. So when you launch a war on police officers and you see crime rates go up in those inner cities, what you're talking about, crime rates that black men that suit up every single day and make a sacrifice for our country to keep our streets safe, right? Have to go deal with because of the rhetoric of people that are elitists and in positions of power, like the politicians, like the media, like the entire ecosystem that is launching a war on police officers in an effort to secure the black vote.
Yeah. All right. It says, I'm a black Christian woman. I'm also conservative. And I just want to say, Candace, it's an extra plus to our society. I agree with you on every point, especially the media being devilish. It's nothing but a vessel for Satan, but it's so refreshing to hear someone your age speak common sense about the black community and the liberal agenda that has invaded the black community to the point that it is now another form of slavery. Most of my friends, associates, and even my church, including my pastor, has been brainwashed by the Democratic Party and the media. And I thank God for you, and I wish you could be on the show more often to help reach all of the black people that listen to this program.
Let me, I want to have one comment. This is coming once again from Herman. He's one of my college buddies I went to college with. He said, he's African-American. I've known him, great guy. He said, so happy that y'all are standing up for what is right. It isn't being said on other media outlets. The truth is tough to hear, but needs to be said. He says, I'm a black conservative and a Republican. It is refreshing to know that we are not alone in our walk in Christ and patriotism. So he wants to say thank you for this.
Thank you, guys. I mean, I exist here because of the people all around the nation that have supported me and told me to keep going. And, you know, I've been pretty fearless because I know that we're on the side of goodness. We're on the side of God. How can we lose? And the answer is we can't.
Do you get censored on social media?
I do get censored on social media, especially on Facebook, and I am taking illegal steps to remedy it.
Good.
Yeah, it says, well, how do you handle it?
Legal steps, lawyers, because that's where you have to take the fight, which we're talking about censorship. It's unconstitutional, and it takes time. Unfortunately, I wish it was you instantly get a win and they have to undo everything they've done to your account, but, you know, I'm in it for the long haul. And I use my platform to expose them, which I think what helps as well and draws attention to the issue so that hopefully some of our congressmen will take steps to also remedy it.
I hope so.
Right.
I hope
You know,
so.
Mother, as we got to close, we want to make mention to the people that if you've not gotten Candace's new book, Blackout, please, please get it, read it. Don't just get one copy, get several copies to pass out to your community. And Mother, I think it would be great if we had a word of prayer.
Yes.
For it. Father, we come before you in the name of your Son, Jesus. We thank you for Candace and the gift that she is to this nation. We ask that there be a hedge round about her.
Yes.
We ask for a greater wisdom and a greater anointing to speak the truth, to impact this nation for what is good and what is right.
Yes.
Bless her in all of her ways. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And thank you, Candace, and our love and prayers are with you. We'll be back with you tomorrow beginning at 9 a.m. And thank you, and tell people about the program today. Get them to listen to it this afternoon. I think it comes on at 6 p.m. Get as many people as you can to listen to the program, and we love you and God bless you.